Subscribe to Keep It Terrifying for creepy tales, horror, and nightmares you won't forget. Don't miss out. Hit that subscribe button and keep it terrifying.
The House That Built Jack. Part 1, The Edge of the Map. Jack always said he wasn't running, just leaving. There was a difference, he told himself. One was fueled by fear, the other by choice. But when he stood on the porch of the crumbling house at the edge of a forgotten town, suitcase in one hand, toolbox in the other, the truth itched beneath his skin. He was running. From debt. From the sting of divorce papers. From a son who stopped answering his calls. From the suffocating weight of 42 years that felt like a failed blueprint of someone else's dream. Carpentry had been his only anchor. He wasn't a man of big ambitions, but he knew would like it was language. He could walk into a room and feel where the structure had begun to rot, smell the mold behind the lies of new paint. He trusted his hands, even when he couldn't trust his thoughts. The job offer had come through a handwritten letter, no return address, just an elegant signature, Mr. Ravel. It offered 4 months' pay for 1 month's work, under the table. No permits, no contracts. Just fix up the house at 1130, Ashridge Lane, Elmbrook. He'd never heard of Elmbrook. No one had. It wasn't on his GPS, and the only reason he found it was by following an old paper map he kept in his glove box. The roads turned from pavement to gravel, then narrowed until the trees on either side leaned in like they were trying to whisper secrets into his ears. And then he saw the house. It looked like a memory more than a building, tall, narrow, and brooding. A 2-story Victorian, its paint long peeled away, leaving only dry wood that looked scorched by time. The porch sagged. Windows blinked out dark reflections. The trees around it were all dead, as if the house itself had stolen their life. Jack stood there for a long time. No one else was around. No cars. No people. Not even birdsong. Just wind pushing through the hollow ribs of the house. He rang the old brass doorbell once. No answer. He tried the knob. It turned. Inside, the air smelled stale, like time had been trapped here and was now escaping in slow, sour exhales. The furniture was covered in white sheets. Old photographs hung on the walls, sepia-toned faces that looked like they didn't want to be remembered. And on the hallway table was a note, written in the same looping script as the letter, Jack, start wherever you feel drawn. You'll know what needs fixing. Stay as long as you like. This house will keep you. Ravel. There was no phone. No Wi-Fi. No clocks. Only the creaking sounds of a house shifting on its old bones. Jack set down his suitcase. His tools followed. He started in the kitchen. The floorboards were warped from water damage. The cabinets hung crooked. Something about the space made him uneasy, but he pushed it down. He needed this job. He needed the silence, the isolation, the anonymity. This house didn't know who he was. And that made it perfect. But by the second night, he began to notice things. His hammer had moved from the counter to the floor. Nails he'd left in a pile were now lined in a row, like someone had been counting them. One morning, he woke to find all the chairs in the dining room stacked in a pyramid. He told himself it was fatigue. Too many hours alone. Stress could mess with your head. He'd felt it before. But on the 4th day, as he was pulling up floorboards in the second bedroom, he found a space beneath them, a crawl space, maybe 3 feet deep, lined with cold stone and black dirt. Tucked in the far corner was a leather-bound journal. It was covered in dust, but the pages inside were pristine. The name on the first page made him drop it. Jack. His own name. In his own handwriting. But he had never written it. He flipped through the pages with shaking fingers. They were filled with notes. Detailed accounts of each room he'd been working in, specific fixes he'd made, right down to the broken pipe in the kitchen he'd repaired yesterday. There were entries he hadn't written. Days he didn't remember. Thoughts that weren't his, but they felt familiar, like something he'd dreamed once and forgotten. The last entry read, "Don't trust Ravel. I stayed. I shouldn't have. The house remembers. The house rebuilds." Jack slammed the book shut. His pulse thundered in his ears. What the hell was going on? He wanted to leave. Just get in his truck and drive. He stuffed the journal into his bag, locked the house behind him, and headed out the door. But when he reached the road, it was gone. Just trees. Endless, identical trees. The gravel had vanished, and the way he'd come in was now a wall of forest. He turned around. The house was still there. Taller than before. Closer than it had been a moment ago. Like it had moved. Part 2, The Grain Beneath the Skin. Jack stood frozen, staring at the trees that had swallowed the road. He hadn't imagined it. The path he drove down just days ago, gone. In its place, forest. Dense, silent, unnatural. Every tree identical, bark smooth like polished wood. No birds. No wind. Just the sound of his own breath. He turned back toward the house. It loomed like it was breathing, somehow more solid, more present than it had been a moment ago. The windows watched him. The porch, warped and crooked just yesterday, now stood firm, restored. A chill rolled down his spine. Something had changed. Still gripping the journal, Jack slowly walked back inside. The door swung shut behind him without a touch. The air had grown warmer, heavier. The kitchen was different. The tools he'd left on the counter were gone. Not misplaced, gone. The warped cabinets now hung straight. The floor was no longer water-stained, but smooth and sanded, as if someone had refinished it while he was gone. But he'd been the only one here. He called out, "Hello." Nothing. No reply. No footsteps. Only the sound of the refrigerator humming, even though he was certain it hadn't been working before. He opened a cabinet. Plates. Clean, white porcelain plates. He hadn't brought any. Jack backed away, heart thumping like a drum against his ribs. He took the journal out of his bag again. Flipping through, he found a page that hadn't been there before. The ink was fresh. The house builds itself through you. Memory is wood. Guilt is the nail. Stay long enough, and it becomes home. The handwriting was still his. He dropped the book. Over the next few days, time bent. Jack tried to keep track of it, but the sun outside never seemed to rise or fall. His watch ticked erratically. The clocks inside the house, grandfather clocks, wall clocks, even a gold pocket watch in a drawer, spun wildly or stopped altogether. The house continued to change when he wasn't looking. A broken step on the stairwell would be fixed by morning. A cracked mirror now reflected clean glass. Tools he hadn't used were lying beside projects already completed. Once, he stepped into a room and found sawdust on the floor, a fresh plank nailed into the wall, and his own handprint in the grain. But he didn't remember doing any of it. He started finding more journals. Each one identical. Black leather. No dust. Pages filled with his handwriting, but with thoughts he'd never thought, memories he didn't own. Some were dreams, written in detail. Others were blueprints, floor plans of rooms he hadn't explored yet, but which he would eventually find exactly as drawn. One journal was entirely blank, except for the last page. "You've done this before." Jack stopped sleeping. The house didn't let him. When he tried, the walls creaked louder. The lights flickered. The floor vibrated, subtly, like something massive and alive was shifting below. One night, he found the front door open. Rain poured outside, though the sky had been clear minutes before. He stepped out, desperate, ready to sprint in any direction. But he didn't find forest this time. He found another house. Just like the one he was in. Another Victorian. Same porch. Same windows. Same shape. He turned around. Behind him stood a third house. Identical. Rows of them stretched into the darkness, each one flickering slightly, as if struggling to hold their shape. Dozens. Hundreds. Endless. Jack screamed. Back inside, the walls whispered. Faint, just beneath hearing, like voices underwater. He pressed his ear against the drywall in the bedroom. A voice whispered back. Keep building, Jack. You belong to us now. The house remembers. He tore the drywall open with his bare hands. Beneath the plaster was not insulation, not wood. But flesh. Pale, veined. Warm. It pulsed beneath his fingers. Jack stumbled back, breathing hard, eyes wild. His fingernails were full of blood, and something thumped once, deep in the wall, like a heartbeat. The house moaned. He tried burning the journal. The flames died before touching the cover. He smashed a window and tried to climb out. The moment his foot crossed the sill, he was back in the front hallway, standing beside the table where the first note had been. Time looped. Rooms changed when he wasn't in them. Sometimes he would open a door and find a version of himself standing there, older, younger, tired, hollow-eyed. They would both scream and the door would slam on its own. One morning, or night, he no longer knew the difference. He woke up with sawdust in his mouth. He was lying on the living room floor, a hammer in one hand, his shirt stained with blood. New beams had been installed above him, perfectly aligned, fresh wood still warm to the touch. He didn't remember doing it. But it had his signature etched in the corner. Not just his name. But the date. 6 years ago. And then he knew. He'd been here before. Maybe 6 years ago. Maybe 60. Maybe always. Part 3, Blueprints of the Mind. Jack sat on the floor for hours, or maybe minutes. He didn't know anymore. He stared up at the beam above him, the one etched with his name and the date. His signature was clean. Carved with precision. His own hand had done it. But he had no memory of touching that beam. He tried to reason through it. Tried to remember each hour of each day. But when he searched his mind, it felt like reaching into a toolbox that had been wiped clean. Nothing useful. Just echoes. He wandered the house aimlessly after that. Each room greeted him like a stranger with a familiar face. He began hearing footsteps that matched his own pace, but from a floor above him. When he stopped walking, so did the steps. Once, he turned too fast and caught his own reflection moving a moment too late in the mirror. Its eyes were tired. Older. Afraid. In what he thought was the attic, though it hadn't been there before, Jack found a locked wooden chest. It was unmarked, but the wood looked newer than the rest of the house. He pried it open with a chisel. Inside were photographs. Hundreds. Each one was a picture of Jack. Some showed him working on the house, hammering, sawing, covered in sweat. Others were of him sleeping, eyes closed in a bed he didn't recognize. And some were wrong. In those, Jack looked distorted. Stretched. Grayed. Limbs too long, spine hunched unnaturally. Like someone had tried to build a human from memory and got the details slightly off. His mouth hung open in every photo. Like he was screaming. He dropped the box and backed away. But even as the photos spilled across the floor, the one on top landed face up. It was a picture of him, right now. In the attic. Holding that very photo. The camera angle was from behind. He spun around. No one there. But he felt it. Like the house had eyes. Like it was looking through him. That night, Jack tore every mirror from the walls. Smashed them with his fists. Shards glittered across the floor like tiny teeth. He found another journal tucked inside the wall behind one mirror. This one had a title etched into the leather, Blueprints of the Mind. He opened it. The first page simply said, "We don't build the house. The house builds us." He tried to stop working. Locked his tools away. Hid them under the floor. But the next morning, his hands were raw. Splinters lined his fingertips. And when he walked into the hall, a new door had been installed. One he hadn't seen before. One he knew he had built. Against his will. Or maybe not. He started catching glimpses of things in the corners. A shadow at the end of the hall. A figure standing at the top of the stairs, always just turning away as he looked up. Sometimes he heard someone whispering in the vents. "Almost done, Jack. Just one more room." Jack found the basement door one morning. He was sure it hadn't been there before. He didn't want to go down. Every instinct told him to stay away. But he opened it anyway. The stairs led down into darkness, but the air smelled of sawdust, fresh wood, and copper. He flicked the light switch. Dim bulbs buzzed to life overhead, one by one, down the long stairwell. At the bottom was a massive workshop. His workshop. Filled with blueprints pinned to the walls, hundreds of them. All for rooms that didn't exist in the house. Some weren't even rooms, they were impossible structures. Stairs that folded in on themselves. Hallways with no exits. Windows looking out into nothing. And in the center of the room, beneath a hanging bulb, was a single project on a workbench. A wooden coffin. Still open. Still empty. But carved into the lid was his name. Not etched. Grown into the grain. Jack screamed. He ran up the stairs, back into the hallway, but he wasn't in the house anymore. He was in the woods again. Dozens of houses stretched before him, each one flickering faintly, like static. Some looked half-built. Others looked like ruins. And from each house, someone was walking out. All of them were Jack. Some younger. Some older. Some broken, hunched, skin pulled tight like paper. Each with a journal in hand. Each staring at him like they remembered. He turned to run, but the ground opened beneath him. He fell. Through wood. Through time. Through memory. And when he hit the floor, the pain snapped him awake. He was back. In the living room. Hammer in hand. A plank of wood freshly nailed into the wall beside him. On it, his name. Etched in blood. Part 4, Load-Bearing Guilt. Jack no longer questioned how long he'd been inside the house. Time didn't pass here. It shifted. Slipped sideways. One day bled into the next like a wound that wouldn't clot. The sun never truly rose or fell, only flickered behind dusty curtains, casting long, impossible shadows. He'd stopped marking days. The journals took care of that. Dozens now. Maybe hundreds. Some hidden in walls. Others stacked like bricks in the basement. Each one filled in his own hand, blueprints, memories, instructions, fears. Some pages were written in symbols he didn't recognize, but somehow understood. And in all of them, the same words appeared over and over: "You are part of the frame. The house remembers what you forget. Keep building, Jack. You are the blueprint now." Jack's body was changing. His hands had grown calloused in ways he didn't recognize. His skin held the smell of sawdust, sweat, and cedar that never washed off. When he looked at his arms, he could see faint wood grain beneath the skin, lines that curved like the rings of a tree. He scratched one open once, desperate to feel blood. What came out was not red. It was a thick, syrupy brown. Sap. He rarely slept now. But when he did, he dreamed of hallways. Endless hallways stretching in every direction, walls pulsing like lungs. He walked barefoot through them, leaving footprints that slowly filled with sawdust behind him. Sometimes, he came across doors in those dreams. One marked Exit. Another marked Origin. He opened neither. He was afraid of both. One night, while trying to break through the basement wall with a sledgehammer, he struck something hard. Not stone. Bone. He dug with his hands, tearing through plaster and insulation until it was clear, a skeleton, curled like a fetus, its skull caved in. And beside it, a journal. Jack didn't want to open it. But he did. The first page was blank. Then, slowly, words appeared, bleeding into the paper like ink rising from within. I buried myself here. I wanted to stop building, but the house does not allow unfinished work. We are nails, Jack. Driven into place. You think you're the builder? You're the material. After that, Jack stopped fighting. He picked up the hammer again. He began working with purpose. His hands moved without thought. He built door frames, cabinets, stairs that spiraled into nowhere. Rooms that appeared behind closets. Secret passageways that looped back to the kitchen. Every night, something new was waiting. Every morning, the house had grown. He never remembered doing the work. But his hands were always raw. And then came the final blueprint. He found it on his pillow one night. Drawn in red ink, on yellowing paper. It was a diagram of himself. Not metaphorically. It was anatomical, heart, lungs, bone, brain, all labeled with measurements. Arrows pointed to different parts, load-bearing memory. Fault line, guilt fracture. Support beam, denial. Anchor, regret, must remain intact. At the bottom, a note, insert into foundation. Final piece. Completion requires sacrifice. Jack didn't scream. He didn't panic. He simply stood up, walked to the basement, and opened the trapdoor beneath the workbench, the one he hadn't seen before but somehow knew was there. A narrow tunnel led into the earth. The walls were lined with bones. Some human. Some not. At the end of the path stood a frame, unfinished, pulsing with warmth, wooden ribs arching like a beast mid-breath. And in its center. An empty space. His size. He stepped forward. Felt the wood rise to meet him. Felt nails slide gently into his hands, ribs, skull, without pain. Just pressure. Like a hug from the house itself. The frame sealed around him. His eyes closed. And then. The house was quiet. For the first time. Complete. In a small rural town that doesn't appear on maps, there stands a beautiful Victorian home. Restored. Immaculate. The wood gleams in the light. The windows blink politely. The porch invites guests with soft creaks. Sometimes, a traveler finds it. A man, usually. Tired. Worn down. Looking to disappear. He finds a letter. A name. Mr. Ravel. He walks inside. And somewhere beneath the floorboards, the walls hum softly, remembering.